Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. Our speaker today is Challis. Challis is a student and teacher in the Insight tradition of Buddhism. He is a teacher, founding member, and past guiding teacher of Insight Community of the Desert in Palm Springs. Ayakema, Lee Brasington, Narayan Lieberson, Larry Yang, and Irina Weissman are key teachers who have inspired and illuminated his practice. Serving queer community is a passion. 2023 marked his co-teaching of the 7th Annual Queer Retreat at Dharma Dana Retreat Center with Leslie Booker. Ian teaches regular drop-in classes as well as retreats. He is a qualified teacher of MBSR, a graduate of Spirit Rock's Community Dharma Leader Teacher Training, and was formally invited by Irina Weissman to teach in the lineage of U Ba Khin and Ruth Dennison. For a calendar of his offerings, Ian's website is ianchallis.com. Welcome, Ian.
Okay. I wanted to bring his energy in at the beginning of this talk, Jim Gross, because he was one of the people who started the Sangha here in Palm Springs where I live. And he was one of our early teachers, and he died in 2019. And Jim was a gentle giant of a gay man, and he had a beautiful openness, even though life was often difficult for him and he had some big health challenges. But he brought so much joy everywhere he went, and he loved the Dharma and he loved service. And Jim, as in our early days of creating Sangha here, where there were kind of lots of different opinions and ideas about how things should be, and board meetings that would go for like 4 hours, he brought so much patience and equanimity during these difficult meetings and challenges that would come to our Sangha, and worked so hard and so generously. And he spent the last years of his life bringing mindfulness practices to people impacted by the justice system and people experiencing homelessness here in Palm Springs. And I miss Jim, and I just kind of wish Jim could be with us here today, and in some ways he is, because we're remembering him. And Jim embodied generosity, which is actually what I want to talk about tonight. Generosity as a means to joy in a wounded world. So it's one of the beautiful qualities called the Paramis, a sort of map of the heart. And sometimes we talk about the energies that bring about oppression and the energies that bring about freedom and liberation. And there are so many, words and names for these energies that come from and through the human heart, a heart that's responding to life from that unconditioned, uncolonized, unlimited place that is our birthright, from a place of freedom, from a place of freeing. And there's a beautiful list that some of you may know in the teachings of the 10 Paramis, or beautiful qualities. And I'd like to spend a few moments introducing them and then sort of focus on generosity. And you might be more familiar with paramitas if your training or background is more in the Mahayana tradition. So I keep a little card with the list of the 10 paramis on my desk. And I have it there to remind me of them. And I love to look for them. I call it Paramis spotting. Can I see truthfulness? Can I see energy? Can I see wisdom in others? Or maybe I want to call in one of these beautiful qualities and let it support me during a difficult time. So the 10 are generosity, which I'm going to spend some time with tonight, and virtue, which is kind of an old-fashioned sounding word, but it's really at the foundation of our practice because it's about holding our ethics and our integrity in the world, our values and actions in alignment, how we relate to ourselves, to others and communities with harmlessness and kindness and care. And renunciation is the third, all about letting go, which we love to talk about in Buddhist circles, letting go of the belief that happiness lies in accumulating, getting, owning, having, and, figuring out where real lasting happiness lies. And wisdom, the deep knowing that's beyond words, what's known when we are able to look with clear eyes and an open heart. Energy, the quality of bringing our full self to whatever is truly important or benefit, that energy that allows us, to show up for life, for each other and for ourselves. Confidence in the direction that we are choosing. And patience, quiet determination, the letting go of the need to control, sense of allowing, making space for unhurriedness. Truthfulness is letting go of intentional or habitual delusion that's very easy to fall into in this culture. And resolve, the power of believing our aspirations. And we don't have to take a bodhisattva vow to have resolve, but knowing our values, remembering them and allowing them to guide our actions. And loving kindness, which isn't just the words or the cultivation practice, but so importantly, the actions that come from that practice. So in a text that I love says, I cannot provide for the welfare and happiness of others merely by wishing for it. Let me put forth effort to accomplish it. So loving kindness and effort. And then equanimity, this quality of the heart that holds everything that is in wisdom, holds the joys and the sorrows of life, the impermanence. This is the sureness that anchors the boat when the winds are howling. And we find that in our body, the deepest knowing and presence that we have within us. So just a quick overview of the Paramis, but these are the qualities that it's said lead to Buddhahood. And that the historical Buddha and all the past Buddhas and all the future Buddhas all have to practice these to fruition, to fullness. And so these are 10 qualities that we too are invited to explore and practice, cultivate for our benefit and the well-being of others. So one of my teachers at Spirit Rock, Gina Sharp, calls practice with the Paramis a radical shift in identity, which I like very much. So we're shifting away from our limited self towards something bigger, something essential and free and giving and liberating. And you might call it your Buddha nature, your higher self, or whatever resonates for you. But really it's the heart that we access when we begin to disentangle ourselves from greed, aversion, and confusion. So in the stories that grew up, the legends and stories that grew up around the Buddha's past lives, there's a series of hundreds of Jataka tales. And it's a collection of hundreds of them, and they recount lots of lives of the Buddha to be, the Bodhisattva, and how he developed these paramis, these beautiful qualities. and he experienced different bodies and genders, and he was all kinds of beings. He was a monkey who patiently saved the life of an ungrateful person. He was a stag who outwitted a king and, got him to stop killing animals. He was a prince who gave away everything he owned. He was a swan. He was a merchant. He was a fish. He was a tree spirit. All kinds of things. But the purpose of these tales, or one of the purposes, is that it was only over the course of many, many lifetimes that the Buddha, to be completely realized, these qualities brought them to fullness. And so there's something as a practitioner that I find really beautiful in this, because it reminds me that liberation, that freedom from suffering, is a really gradual practice. If it took the Buddha eons of time, as it said, and countless lifetimes, it may take me a while too. It may take us a little time. And so we can relax into the knowledge that this is an ongoing practice. There is not an expectation, not a timeline. And certainly we can bring our energy and resolve to the practice. But again, and going back to the words of Gina Sharp, she says this is not an endeavor of time and space, but outside of it. It's really interesting to lift our practice out of time and space. The practices are how we are in the world and how we develop them in daily life in relation to others, to people, to animals, to the earth, to ourselves. And we don't always know how a single positive action will reverberate. We don't always know how our actions will connect to other actions and the intersecting effects of your actions, my actions, their actions, this sort of karma that we create together. But we can be sure that every positive action extends beyond our current view, beyond what we're able to see right here, right now. So this morning I want to stay close to this first parami of giving or generosity. The Pali word is dana. And us being here today is dana. It's generosity. We're showing up for each other. We're showing up to support each other's practice. We're showing up to support a community. There is giving in that. And this is the quality of the heart that we call generosity expressed in action. So in the Pali language, the language of the Buddha's teachings, there are two words that are associated with generosity, Chaga and dana. And Chaga precedes dana. Chaga is the intention, that inner sense of generosity, that impulse toward being generous. And then dana is the outward expression. And our intentions are really powerful, and our actions are even more powerful. Let me put forth effort. And the Buddha was big on generosity. And I want to stay here for a few minutes. And in one of the suttas, he says, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared if there were someone to receive their gift. Even if it were their last bite. And this particular form of practice was so essential to the Buddha's means of teaching. So even before he taught the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path, before he taught anything, he talked about dana, he talked about giving. Along with meditation and our ethics or sila, it's called a pillar of the Dharma, essential to our practice. So why would this be? Why would the Buddha teach dana or generous giving before anything else? And in most traditional cultures, the practice of giving is a core value. My friend and co-teacher Lorene Chabola, who grew up in Filipino culture, shared with me that this, the fundamental importance that giving holds in her culture of origin, and how it's taught from childhood as an essential way of being. It's an expression of care, of connection. It's a means of knitting community. And so perhaps when the Buddha entered into a new community, this was an accessible place for him to connect to new students. This foundational practice may have been an opening of virtue that people were already practicing culturally. And so a launching pad, a natural, familiar place to begin. And we can't simultaneously let go and cling. When we open our hand and give of ourselves or what's ours, we're letting go of self, we're letting go of separation. So in the act of heartful giving, there's a lessening of the grip of being a limited, separate being, just concerned with me and mine and myself above everything else. And there's a sense of release into community, into connection, being part of, into well-being together, moving into or toward the we of life. And this is a really helpful mindset to be in as we practice the way of freedom, the way of letting go, beginning to thin that sense of self and separation. So that quality of generosity, willingness to open and connect to others in the world is the start of the path. It prepares the ground to cultivate the seeds of practice. And then the path culminates, reaches its fullness with generosity, because after attaining full liberation, a being like the Buddha starts their work for the benefit of all beings, to guide them toward liberation. And so every act of generosity, whether large or small, is important because it's a loosening of that tendency to grasp and hold on to, that separation we feel so often between self and others, self and world. And instead it's a yes, a big yes to together, a reminder of our plugging into our common humanness. It's like getting unstuck, releasing, circulating. And so that brings up the question, how do you teach dana? How do you teach the expression of generosity? So you can't really teach an action. Someone can model an action or they can talk about it, but it's only when you do it yourself that you really learn, that it becomes yours. Just like our insight is deepened by our own moments of practice, people can tell us about their moments of practice, but it's only when we experience it ourselves that we understand it. And the more that we do an action, especially an action of the heart, the more it's integrated into our ways of being. So then we can approach dana as a place of training, experimentation, learning. How does it work in your experience? How does it show up in the conditions of your life? How does giving feel for you? Where is it easy, maybe even automatic? And where is it kind of sticky? Are there ways of giving that come very naturally to you? Sometimes I think we're unconscious of these places. Maybe you're just really generous with your time. Maybe you're generous with the resources that you have available to you. Maybe you're willing to listen or just show up for people. Maybe you're generous with your communities, giving time, organizing and supporting. Maybe there's just a natural helpfulness within you, seeing that need and filling it, maybe almost second nature. Maybe you're generous with a smile and a kind word. So the Buddha's path is gradual. And remember, according to the legends, it took the Buddha to be many lifetimes to perfect these beautiful qualities. So this work outside of time, inclining the mind and heart again and again to what we call skillful, beautiful, liberating qualities. And just as metta or loving kindness is a sort of practice for meeting the conditions of life, relating with kindness and care to those that we encounter, so is our practice of giving. We're bit by bit replacing old conditioning, personal and cultural, that separates us from others and our innate nobility and beauty. So we all have an attitude, says Zoketsu Norman Fisher, our own way of approaching life. Attitude literally means stance, the way you hold your body, your posture, the way you stride forth into your life. We come by our attitudes honestly. We get them from our parents, communities, and cultures, from our experiences, traumas, and triumphs. We assume our attitudes reflect reality. We assume they are fixed and unchangeable. So this is the water we swim in. And the Buddha taught a technology for seeing deeply and freeing ourselves, waking up to old conditioning. And it starts with generosity, Chaga, expressed in the action of giving, dana. So just a few places I want to share from my own personal experience with giving, and I think about it a lot. But one is to never crush a generous impulse, or stated more positively, giving wings to Chaga. But that's the way it showed up for me originally, was just never crush a generous impulse. So if I notice the intention in my mind to give, to offer of what I have, to benefit another or a group, there is a brightness in that. And then I often notice the clouds roll in. You've already given. Maybe, it might not be appreciated. Let someone else do it, and so on, And then I notice the light of that generous impulse grows weaker, and the flame flickers a little bit. And then I wake up to that, and I ask, what's going on here? Oh, generous impulse. That's nice. That's a beautiful thing. How can I support that intention all the way to action, so that chaga, that impulse of generosity, to dana, generosity in action, the giving. And I look at it. So what are my motivations? And would this gift be of true benefit to the receiver? How can I be of benefit in this moment? And in that pause and reorientation, the flame grows stronger again. And another rule or training that I undertake is to let go of zero-sum thinking. I'm not sure who said it, but give as though there's nothing to lose, because there's only gain in giving, that both the giver and the receiver benefit from the act of giving, and letting go of calculations. They gave me this, so I should give them that. And I can remember going on residential meditation retreats early, back when I started my practice, and engaging in these mental calculations. Okay, it's a 10-day retreat. There are 2 teachers, so that's 20 work days. And then there's travel time and there's prep time. So let's see, if they got paid X dollars per hour, that would be this total, and then divide that up by the number of people sitting the retreat. That's not exactly what I would call heartful giving. That was the market economy conditioning in action. And then the question is, if this moment conditions the next, how have I just conditioned the next moment with that sort of calculation? And what happens when I approach the opportunity not transactionally, but as people do in many other cultures, as an expression of our connection, as the sure heart's release, our shared good and well-being, moving from the me to the we. So one of the key supports of the development of generosity is seeing it and celebrating it, appreciating it. And in the Buddha's culture, giving was celebrated, it was savored, and the teachings offer us some guidelines for the practice of generosity. So there's a short list. The first is giving with kindness and goodwill. So giving with a generous heart in such a way that the receiver is respected and lifted up and not devalued in any way. Giving not out of obligation, so that the motivation is more allied with the heart qualities, metta, compassion, and joy. When my mind was working out the numbers and the dollars per hour, that was out of a sense of obligation. And the giving from the heart is quite different. Giving with one's own hand, meaning not at a remove, and if possible, actually hand to hand, so that the whole body is involved in the blessing of generosity. Giving what's useful, in other words, something that is of value. Giving what will benefit the recipient, being thoughtful in what we give, giving what we truly believe will be for the well-being and benefit of the receiver. And more than what's given, whether the gift is big or small, whatever the gift is, it's the intention and manner of giving that makes the gift valuable. In other words, it's what's in our hearts and mind and the connection that is truly important. So there's another sutta where the Buddha illustrated this with a simile, and he was talking to a follower named Vacha. I tell you, Vacha, even if a person throws the rinsings of a bowl or a cup into a village pool or pond, thinking, may whatever animals live here feed on this, that would be a source of merit, to say nothing of what is given to human beings. But nowhere in that list from the Buddha does he say, give all that you have, give till it hurts, because it's ultimately not about sacrifice, but about connection and loosening the compulsion to grasp, to cling, to hold on tight to what ultimately can't bring lasting happiness. I love the image that I think I learned from Larry Yang, that you can't simultaneously open the hand to give and hang on tight. And it can be an interesting and helpful contemplation to notice the places where you are practicing generosity already. It may come so naturally to you that you don't notice it. Well, of course I always listen to people. Well, of course I always give generously. Well, of course I do this. Doesn't everybody? And so it's a good practice to notice and celebrate, mindfulness of generosity, mindfulness of our own generous places. And this is why part of beautiful giving can be giving with one's own hand. We place a lot of store in anonymous giving in our culture, and that can be a beautiful way of giving. But giving directly is also important, with our own hand, not hiding it from ourselves or others, but connecting person to person. Creating that connection, maintaining that connection, sustaining one another. And when we do this according to the teachings, before giving, the heart mind of the giver is happy. While giving, the mind of the giver is made peaceful. And having given, the mind of the giver is uplifted. So bringing presence and mindfulness to the whole process, from Chaga, that intention, all the way through dana, the act of giving. Really feeling what generosity is like. How is the heart mind when you are forming that intention toward generosity? How is it to actually make or feel that connection as you share? And how does it feel when you've shared from the heart? And do you ever regret it? I'm someone who is pretty adept at collecting regrets along the path of life. But when I reflect, I notice I don't seem to be able to find any places where I regret having been generous. And when I've shared what I have with another, I do feel that uplift that the Buddha spoke about, even when I remember it years later. Even if it wasn't received terribly gratefully or recognized, I'm still glad that my heart was open enough to make the act. And we can recollect the generosity of others, and we can even start with life, how the universe and the earth that is so precious and yet freely shared. And we can reflect on the gift of the Dharma, the teachings, the Buddha and the monastics and the Sanghas that have kept teachings alive and available for 2,600 years through the practice of dana, through this intentional giving. The Dharma is only alive now for us because of giving. That's the economy of the Buddhist path, the Dharma freely shared. And I think that's such an interesting contemplation. Could the Buddha Dharma have survived and spread around the world through time and all these cultures and political and social change and upheaval for thousands of years if it wasn't considered truly priceless and therefore given and shared with love and given freely? What other forms endure that are not based on giving, on voluntary yet heartfelt support? What government will still be here in 2,600 years? What corporations will still be around? What social media will still exist? But I think that the Dharma will be here. That's the miracle of generosity and the effectiveness of the gift economy. So there's a beautiful book that I'm sure many of you know, Braiding Sweetgrass by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's an indigenous poet and writer and professor of botany. And in that book she writes, the market economy story has spread like wildfire, with uneven results for human well-being and devastation for the natural world. But it is just a story we have told ourselves, and we are free to tell another, to reclaim the old one. One of these stories sustains the living systems on which we depend. One of these stories opens the way to living in gratitude and amazement at the richness and generosity of the world. One of these stories asks us to bestow our own gifts in kind, to celebrate our kinship with the world. We can choose. If all the world is a commodity, how poor we grow. When all the world is a gift in motion, how wealthy we become. So the traditional teachings mention 4 gifts we can give. We can give material support. We can give protection. We can give the Dharma as teachings. And also very beautifully, we can give the gift of non-fear, harmlessness. The gift that we give when we say no one needs to fear us, and we take that stance. We commit to harming none and being of benefit as we're able. There's a Buddhist scholar, Taitetsu Uno, who wrote, "The actions of a generous heart are incalculable in value." And so as I was reflecting on this topic, I thought about who in my early life I experienced as generous. Where did I see generosity? And I thought of a few people who seemed giving, but I found my mind kept resting on a woman named Garcia Mora. And she was a friend of a neighbor who lived down the street from where I grew up, and she was house sitting for these neighbors. And she was somebody that I only knew for a few days, and who came into a time, my childhood, when I was, I would say, experiencing a fair amount of neglect and loneliness. And Mrs. Mora was from Egypt. And somehow, being a free-range kid in the neighborhood, like we were in those days, she and I got to talking. She was outside sitting on the patio. And for the few days that she was there, she invited me to come over every afternoon and sit on the patio with her and shared mint tea with me. And she would spend part of each afternoon talking with 8 or 9-year-old me about anything and everything, it seemed. And there was nothing at all that she needed from me, although she seemed very happy to hear my thoughts and stories, just like I was really enjoying hearing hers. And my memory, the felt sense that I have, even right now, is of just this unhurried gift of her attention and presence. Just given freely and with great kindness and care. And how I felt seen and valued in a generous, loving way. So much so that, 53 years later, I can still feel that. I can still feel that generosity and want to share that with you. So, that's the karma of a single act of giving. So I want to invite us to just sit for a moment and let the words settle, and then open the floor. So let's just take a few moments. And maybe reflecting on your own personal relationship to giving, to Chaga, the intention, and dana, the action of giving. How does it show up in your experience, in the conditions of your life? Where is it easy for you to be generous? Maybe bringing to mind a recent moment of giving something, or even a word, something large or small. What was in your heart before you gave? What was the intention? And can you remember how it felt in the moment of giving, making the connection, the dana, the action? And what happens now in the present when you remember that action?
I'll say something. This is John. I'm online.
Hi, John.
Hi, nice to see you, Ian. I was with you at the Queer Retreat 2 years ago.
Oh, hi.
Arena.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, thank you for this talk. I was thinking, especially, I think that around COVID and post-COVID, I realized more and more, and as I'm aging, how important connection is. And what I felt called to do is to begin to express that with people I loved, not just let it be, but to express it, how important, how much I valued them, um, and find ways of um, finding an open expression that nurtured the connection and grew the connection. And um, the other thought I had is I have a friend now who's has ovarian cancer, and so I'm giving my time and my energy and my thoughts and my heart to her care quite willingly. There was no question about doing it, and it was this inner pull, but also almost like something from the outside pulling me into taking on this role, and understanding that, because I can kind of slip into caregiving as a trap, a way of hiding myself, but understanding that this was something that was going to be a journey of discovery for me as well as for her. And but it just it felt like a calling, I guess that's what I'd say. And it's been a wonderful journey, even though it's kind of marked by her suffering and the progression of this illness and treatment. But somehow it has transformed that experience for me through that of just being as generous as I can with my time and my resources.
Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing those expressions of generosity and connection. And I was very intrigued by what you said of like it not just coming from the inside, but also feeling pulled or drawn. And that's a lovely quality to experience. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? I'm not sure how it works with the hybrid for folks in the room.
People in the room can just raise their hand or just start speaking.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there's anything that needs to be said or could be said on the subject of expecting gratitude, reciprocity, anything that could be said aside from don't.
Don't's pretty good advice. But yeah, why? And I think it's because there's a clinging there, and there's something, there's giving to get, and that's a very natural human tendency to want to be appreciated for what we've given. And I don't think that that's something that we can uproot, but I think the kind of giving that the Buddha is talking about is coming as much from a place of like, here, this is for you, do with it as you will. My only intention is to be of benefit and to offer this and to have that be enough. And that's a difficult practice. And I referenced in what I said, it's like there are times when I have given really generously and it hasn't been received very well, or it hasn't been noticed. And that's not what's important. That feeling is real, but it's not what's important. What's important is the feeling, is sort of remembering and celebrating the feeling that I had in making that connection, in going from intention to action and giving of myself, so opening of myself. So I can keep celebrating that because that's my heart opening and moving toward others, even when it isn't accepted. And, and we have no control over the world and how people will respond. We just put out the best that we can. But I think it's more just like, can I appreciate that growing energy in myself to connect? So.
Yeah. Oh, I was just wondering, I have a couple of people in my life who are, very important to me, but who are kind of like very big takers, which has kind of resulted in, at times kind of like unhealthy relationships, I think, or an unhealthy situation for me. And so I think in the last couple of years, I've been really working on learning how to have boundaries with these particular people.
Yeah.
And so I guess I just wondered if you had anything to say about when, this kind of giving with an open hand, but can, I don't know. I guess I'm talking about more relationships, but when that can kind of result in a
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind for me immediately is again, not giving out of obligation was one of the Buddha's criteria for beautiful giving or for the practice of dana. So, when somebody is saying I need this, give this to me, I want this, and sort of in an unhealthy way, that's sort of cutting off your ability to give without feeling obligation in some ways. So I would say that the kind of giving that we're talking about here comes from your own heartfelt intention, your own movement of the heart, not because somebody is demanding it or saying, give me, but because you want to make that connection and you're drawn in that direction, just like John felt drawn, to help his friend. It's like, where is that drawn? Is it being pulled or is it being drawn in a healthy way because it's where your heart naturally wants to move? So I think listening to that impulse of generosity, because we're not talking about an obligation to meet. We're talking about following through on an impulse of generosity. So that's where giving is bright, and that's where we ourselves are benefited, and where there's brightness in our practice. And boundaries, the Buddha had boundaries. It's like, there were people he said, sorry, can't help you. So I hope that's a little helpful. And maybe there are other folks on the floor or in the Zoom who have thoughts on how to work with those boundaries.
Thank you. That was an excellent response and helpful.
Okay, thanks.
Really great question, too.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds like the core is going towards self-revelation of sort of the childlike nature that we all still hold inside ourselves, to go in and out into the world and connect with all that's out there. And it's in an unbiased and actually, to a certain extent, playful way. So its list is, as an adult, it's one step further of being conscious, as you were saying, of all our intentions, but also absolutely listening to the other. And in that way, seeing our reflection in that. So the giving is that generosity is really bringing ourselves into it more than whatever the action is. So I'm basically sort of repeating what you're saying. It's the connection, but it's that thing that we all have that inner Buddha nature, and that is the quality that just naturally arises out of us, that we may have forgotten from childhood, of that desire for connection. and that is our right to be seen as well. So it takes two to tango in that sense.
That's beautiful, and thank you for bringing in the child heart energy too, because I think that is our nature. Our true nature is to be helpful, is to give, is to share. And it's only later we learn everything is limited, and you got to hang on to it, and if you give it away, you won't have it. But that's not our child heart. That's not our innate nature. So thanks for bringing that in.
And that takes us to time, I guess. So thank you so much, Ian. And Ian's website is ianchallis.com. And do we have any announcements? Like a host, maybe?
I'm the host. Okay, so there's food outside. So, after the service, go out and chat away. There's tea. When you're finished with the cups, please just put them in the sink. I'll take care of that. I will, how appropriately, we brought up the topic of dana, so I will be bringing over a dana bowl. And that gift that you give, suggested, anything you give up to $20, is to help not only in terms of honorarium to our speaker, but to the San Francisco Buddhist Center, who's provided us this space, and for all the supportive actions within our community, including the monthly newsletter that goes to incarcerated practitioners and others. And hopefully some way will revive Larkin Street. So I think that's it.
Can I make one announcement too? I just wanted to let folks know I'm offering a retreat for queer folk on Vashon Island in Washington State, in a beautiful Boy Scout camp by the water. And it's April 12th through 17th, and it's offered through Lotus Insight Sangha of Seattle. So if you're interested and you look up Lotus Insight Seattle, you'll find it. And I know you are also doing a retreat for queer male identified folk, April 17th through 21st with Sean Oakes, who was in my CDL. So there's some beautiful opportunities to do residential practice.
There's still spaces, and please sign up. You can go to gaybuddhist.org and get more information and register.
Next week our speaker is David Lewis, who has been following the Dharma path for 50 years, has a degree in comparative religious studies. He teaches at several Buddhist Sanghas around the Bay Area and offers a weekly meditation group for seniors, currently on Zoom at Open House. Great friends of the Sangha. So, any other announcements? We'll gather for the dedication of merit. So, we'll get in a circle here. Ian, would you like to offer the dedication of merit today?
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Great.
Hey, are we ready?
Ready.
All right. Going forth into this world so in need of light, may I bring all the kindness and wisdom I embody to reach each being and each situation that I encounter. May the power of our practice today strengthen our resolve to be agents of peace and justice in this world. Going forth together into this world so in need of light, may we together bring all the kindness and wisdom we embody. May the power of our practice today strengthen our resolve to be agents of peace and justice in this world. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Cass, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.